Hey, welcome to the Citizen Mike Show. Thanks for tuning in. We do appreciate it. My name is Mike Berdinsky, and sharing with me that split screen is Republican Town Councilor Christina Tatta. Christina, thanks for coming back on the show. It's always been fun. It's going to be fun again. I know it.
Yes.
So we're in the heat of the summer, and usually around the heat of the summer every other year, the political parties kind of get organized. They decide who their candidates for the municipal offices are going to be. And I'm just trying to figure out what the Republican Town Committee is likely to do for their candidates and how you fit in.
Sure. The Republican Town Committee endorsed their slate at the last meeting, and it looks like for council, we will be running 7. Now that won't be decided officially until the caucus, which is the middle of July. So we'll know for sure then. But it looks like we're running 7 council candidates this year.
And are you one of them?
And I am one of them. Yes, I will be running for re-election for my 3rd term. Yes.
All right. Well, good luck on the campaign trail.
Thank you.
Let's get down to business. Some big things have been happening. We on the Citizen Mike Show have not dealt with ARPA, and that's because as long as I was chairman of the ARPA committee and while things were, in progress, I stayed away from that subject. But I'm no longer chairman of the ARPA committee, and the council and the town has processed almost all of the applications. I think there might be a handful left that may be presented to the council in the next meeting or two. But now, sort of like the deck is cleared, I was thinking that maybe with your help, we would give maybe a little report card on how the ARPA process, has been working. And heck, it's sort of a massive project, right? I mean, $13 million. It involves, the law department, which has a role, the consultant, which has a role, the committee, which has a role, the council has a role, the mayor arguably also, has a role. So I just wanted to give a look back and issue a bit of a report card. And I want to start with what's been in the news recently, which was an award to Gaylord Hospital. And I want to start there because it's probably the most challenging for the Citizen Mike Show to talk about. Gaylord, very popular. It was the biggest grant. It was the biggest grant that was given out. But you were not in favor of this grant. You voted against $500,000 to Gaylord. Walk me through your thinking on that.
Sure. So I remain consistent throughout the ARPA process. I know we've been talking about this on your show in the past. I didn't feel that the way to go with spending the ARPA money was to give it to the nonprofits and businesses. I thought that the most fair way was to divide it amongst all taxpayers in town instead of kind of picking winners and losers, is the way I saw it. So I was in favor of spending it on town projects that would have reduced the tax burden for everybody. So anything we would have had to spend money on, infrastructure, town improvements, anything to just spread it around equally. And so what kind of ended up happening was with these applications, we had the committee. The committee's role was supposed to be to kind of depoliticize it so that people weren't getting money based on who they knew or who they were connected with, or just to be an elected official and have to say no to a very popular charity in town or organization is a tough spot. But as we know, the committee is no longer, and so we were put in that spot. And I ultimately voted against it, not because of anything Gaylord did wrong or no reflection on them, but I just don't feel this was the right way for the town to be spending the ARPA money.
The Gaylord application was for $1 million. And some members of the town council, most members of the town council, I guess, felt uncomfortable with the size of the award. $1 million is, again, the biggest ask that the committee or the town had seen. It still ended up with $500,000. And I try to want to identify the issue that was or should have been in front of the town council during their vote. What should be or what was the criteria if you decide to give Gaylord the money or not? And I'm not asking you that it's a rhetorical question to set the table, because that should have been the mental processes that the counselors would go through. It was a serious exercise in critical thinking, or should have been, for the counselors to say, okay, we love Gaylord. We love what they do. We love their work. They have a caring and skilled staff. They're famous, not only locally, but regionally, statewide. We wish the best for Gaylord and all their patients that they've ever cared for. But is this a popularity contest? Is the decision to give $500,000 to Gaylord a matter of popularity, a matter of political advantage? What's the litmus test? That's really what this should have been about. I'm not sure that it was. And on behalf of the taxpayers, I would say if the council strayed from the criteria that the town council agreed upon, the criteria on whether or not to give an organization money, if they strayed, then, and they gave money where it shouldn't have gone, they gave money where, to an organization that didn't fit the criteria, that may have been a wonderful organization, but their application didn't fit. Don't the taxpayers, this is to you, aren't the taxpayers' pockets picked a little bit? I mean,
yes, I think so. I think, yeah, in any of those scenarios where either the criteria wasn't met or the federal rules weren't met, and it was, maybe passed through anyway, sure, that's money that we'd be spending on town projects that now we don't have, that we'll need to raise taxes to pay for.
And I just want to give a pitch for my favorite project, which no one else likes, but I'm still sticking with it. Today was a hot and muggy day. My car thermometer said it was 92. I don't know what the heat index was, but it was way up there. I'm not going to the pool. No, that's another issue, another show. Splash pads. We could get one on the east side and one on the west side, and it could be designed in such a way that has multi-purposes, but just use ARPA money for a splash pad. The people on the east side and the west side would love it. Their lives would change. Summer would be different, but oh no. We're not even anyway, let me get back on track.
That's on my list, I think, of projects that I brought up, about 2 years ago now. It's still sitting there on the list, but.
Well, we need money for Gaylord, and we need money for, some other organizations that I'm going to talk about it. So there's no money for splash pads. And it seems that we can refurbish or renovate or upgrade buildings owned by private interests, but we really can't afford to do it for our own building. It's kind of ironic, but keep in mind, I love Gaylord. This is not an anti-Gaylord segment.
Yeah,
I love them. And I mean that. And I mean, they have wonderful people there. But anyway, I want to talk about Gaylord for a minute. I looked at their website just to get a sort of a rounded view of who they are and what they do. 137 bed hospital, and they specialize in advanced rehabilitation caused by any kind of a condition. And they're famous for that. It's a nonprofit hospital, but it's not a charity by any stretch. They charge for every service they give. They get revenues from insurance companies, the government, from donors. So we can't confuse a nonprofit with a charity. And they serve local patients, regional patients, national and international patients. And I mention that because Wallingford's program that it adopted for nonprofits is supposed to be Wallingford centric. It's supposed to be nonprofits getting town money to help Wallingford folks recover from the pandemic. That is I'll read some language in a minute, but that's an overview. And so a legitimate question arises, if a minuscule percentage of Gaylord's business is Wallingford residents, I don't want to use the word qualified, but should they get a high score if there's a committee or a scoring matrix? I mean, it's a very small, by their own admission and their own numbers, Wallingford is a very small piece of their business model. And that's not how Wallingford Town Council set up the nonprofit program. It's Wallingford money. Money belongs to the town of Wallingford, and they're giving it to Wallingford nonprofits, or those nonprofits that help Wallingford residents deal with the pandemic, which was, in 2020. So more about Gaylord. I mentioned sort of their business model, but do we really understand it? This will help. It's not a complete picture, but based on their filings that they have made, it's called the Form 990, the latest one that's available. Bigger nonprofits have to file these financial disclosure forms, and they're available, and they were submitted to the town to help the town decide whether or not this nonprofit should get the money. Well, Gaylord has cash, $33 million, and the last form available, $33 million in cash, pledges and grants receivable of about $5 million, investments in publicly traded securities about $36 million. They have investment income, they have other revenue, so on and so forth. Their total revenue, 93 or almost $94 million in the last most recent information that we have. And their revenue less expenses was almost $6 million. They get money, as I said before, from Medicare, $32 million from Medicare, $5 million from Medicaid. I'm rounding these. About $22 million from Blue Cross and other commercial payers, which would be insurance companies, I gather, would be almost $29 million. So under no circumstances can Gaylord or the council or anyone say this is a hardship case for nonprofits, that they need the money. They certainly don't need the money to do what they do. They have the money. They can raise the money. They have sources of revenue. So, but part of their application was an assistance application, and that just doesn't wash. They don't need financial assistance. So that part of their application wouldn't qualify, and they should get no score. But they also said they had uses for the money for programming, and maybe it's just time to say what that means, because Wallingford has some specific notions, and the programming criteria that was passed by the council reads like this: that the program, and this would be Gaylord's program, which was basically, actually, I'm going to stop and maybe ask you a question, Christina. Wasn't it to upgrade their buildings, upgrade some facilities, modernize them, so on and so forth?
Yes, it was to upgrade, I think one of the patient wings. So it was upgrading patient rooms, basically.
Yeah. So the program is supposed to address a clearly demonstrated need of those in Wallingford who were or are impacted by the pandemic. Well, they wouldn't get a very high score under the Wallingford-centric part of this, because, as indicated, a very small portion of their patients are from Wallingford, but also that money goes to nonprofits is supposed to help those who were or are impacted by that pandemic, but that is not what Gaylord is doing. This is general healthcare infrastructure. Those that were impacted by the pandemic in a health way, they're either healed or they've gotten over it, and very few of them are now going to go to Gaylord. I mean, Gaylord is a rehabilitation hospital. And most of the people, or all the people that are going to go to Gaylord after this project is done, the upgrading of their physical building, the people that are going to go to Gaylord aren't even sick yet. They're not even injured yet. Yet the money Wallingford is supposed to spend for nonprofits are to help those impacted by the pandemic. You just cannot fit this square peg in a round hole. No matter how much you love Gaylord, you can't do it. You just can't do it. And, they shouldn't be awarded money, from ultimately from the general fund because of sentimentality, because of emotional attachments, because of some sort of a loyalty, or because it's good to be seen as a politician. It's good to be seen voting for Gaylord, and that's what really happened. But let's see how the counselors thought about it. We'll use the words from their own mouths to see what criteria they applied. We just happen to have a little video clip of those counselors giving their reasons to give Gaylord some money. So let's roll that clip. 3, 2, 1, go.
I mean, the campus is beautiful. What you do, I mean, the bathroom that I changed in was a temple. I mean, it's part of our town. Somebody took a picture of me on the course. Somebody happens to know me from Middlefield. And I said, I didn't see you out there. And he said, well, I volunteer because Gaylord lets the girls use the softball fields. That's giving back. So I credit that. I don't think 350 is enough. My number is 500.
I think Craig really hits it on the head. You do tremendous work, and no one can deny that. And you impact people's lives so amazingly. People all over the world, even. And so, of course, I think this council wants to support you.
Thank you. I can tell you that I have, in addition to attending events at your facility, I have had the opportunity on multiple occasions to visit the patient rooms of your facility when visiting clients. And I have to say, from the first time I visited over the years until the most recent time I visited, I have been impressed with the quality of care that you do provide for your patients. And one thing that I note about your facility that I don't always observe in various facilities, and I'm not going to isolate any or point them out, but there's something peaceful about your place. I don't know how you do it, but please keep doing it.
Mr.
Thank you.
Chairman,
Mayor.
when did Gaylord start? What year?
1902.
1902.
Yep, 1902.
A very special, singular place in Wallingford history, and your wooded environs have been a peaceful place for so many people. I think, given what they do and how they change lives, their requests should be funded by us. I think you more than deserve what your request is.
So, Christina, you saw that little collage of comments from the counselors giving their rationale to awarding Gaylord $500,000. What'd you think?
Like you said, I mean, everybody loves Gaylord, right? I do too, but I had to vote against it because that's as much as we love it, that's not the criteria. That's not the federal government's criteria. That's not the criteria that the town set up. And I think, like we said before, politically, I think it's very difficult to say no to some of these organizations in town. It's a tough spot to be in. I mean, that was not a comfortable night for me, but I think if you really stick to the criteria, I don't think you could have voted yes for that. And not just Gaylord, but, several others.
I heard, the comments like you did. the critical thinking just wasn't there. Critical thinking meaning matching the facts to the criteria. Does it apply? Does it not apply? The strengths and weaknesses of the application based on the written criteria, that just wasn't there. One counselor was very impressed with their restrooms. So we should have sent out a notice. All of you nonprofits with great restrooms, apply, you may get $500,000, Another counselor said it was a peaceful place. So we should have said, all of you nonprofits that have peaceful places, apply because you may get $500,000. Someone else said, well, they contribute to the community. That's nice, and that's why we love them. But that's not in the criteria. I'm sorry. So you don't get a reward, counselor. You don't get a reward for giving money, or you shouldn't get a reward to giving money to some organization that is part of the community. There are other ways to appreciate them. Give them a plaque, give them a trophy, put it in the mill rate, give them an extra grant, put it in the mill rate, and tax taxpayers for it. Maybe that'll do it. Anyway, should we move off Gaylord, or there's a lot of other things to talk about? Let's move off Gaylord. And I want to talk about, again, a general report card as to how well the ARPA program in Wallingford has been working, because I think if you just read the record journal or hear stuff on the street, maybe everyone's happy about how things turned out, that it was a smooth operation, no bumps in the road. I mean, I don't know what people think, but I gave that issue, a closer look, and it came up with a couple of examples that I want to share with you that sort of illustrate the roles that each participant in the decision-making process plays. And so we know what the consultant, or don't know what the consultant was supposed to do, the council was supposed to do, so on and so forth. So the first example and by the way, Christina, I got to confess, in looking for these examples, I didn't spend an hour. I mean, I spent, like 15 minutes and, I got a couple and I stopped because there's only so much I can do. So there could be others out there. This is not an exclusive list of interesting applications. Well, the first one that I want to talk about is a business that right on the face of their application, they disclose they were not in business from January 1, 2019. That's a requirement. That's a federal requirement. That's a local requirement. It got through to the committee, and all those out there that says, well, if the consultant released it to the committee, it must have complied with ARPA. Not true. Things slipped through. I don't know why this one did, but it was very clear. They started their operation in December 2019 when they gave their financials as they were required to do. They're very clear that they were only in business for a very small part of 2019. So they should have been cut off. But it went from the consultant to the committee, the new committee, not the one that I was on, to the new committee. New committee passed it. It went to the council. The council approved it on June 13, and they're going to get their $25,000, even though they didn't qualify. So here's another example.
And then also, how unfair to anybody who read that and didn't apply because they knew they wouldn't qualify, but then you see that people got the money that shouldn't have. I mean, that must be very frustrating if I were in that position.
In the application, the applicant, the business or the nonprofit, in this case, I had my eye on a business, they're supposed to disclose whether or not they got other federal funds as a result of the COVID pandemic. The most typical is paycheck protection, call it PPP, paycheck protection plan or something. And they're supposed to disclose that. And in the beginning of the ARPA process, when the consultant came in front of the council, the issue was raised. I think this was in February of 2021, but it was the very first time that Jack Regan came in front of the council and introduced himself and explained what he as the consultant was going to do. The issue was raised about other federal funds and, frankly, fraud. And he said, this is an application that is going to be signed under oath. We do not recommend that you check independently. We, the consultants organization, he said, they really weren't interested in that. And he was sort of like, trust the applicant. Well, in the course of the committee meeting, a couple of members of the committee double checked on the PPP status to see if some of these applications were properly completely filled out, properly disclosing. And we found a couple that weren't forthcoming about the PPP money they got. And that was referred to the law department, and the law department handled it. They didn't get their money. But here's one that was approved by the council. The consultant didn't check PPP because they weren't tasked with that. The law department didn't check the PPP because they weren't tasked with that. The old committee that I was part of, we weren't there. And the new committee didn't check on PPP because they weren't that interested in it. And the council didn't check. So no one was tasked specifically make sure that this information is accurate, the information about whether additional federal funds were awarded to businesses. That's an organizational problem, and it really starts with the mayor. You know, as a project manager, he should have said someone needs to have that job of double checking, duplicate, you know, federal funds going to a business. Well, in any event, here's an application. When they asked about, did you get extra federal funds? They said not applicable, but lo and behold, they got $28,000 in PPP money. It got by the consultant, by the committee, by the law department, by the council. They're going to get their $25,000 without being forthcoming on their application. And past practices, they would have been disqualified. They wouldn't have gotten anything. So there's another requirement. I'm not sure if we talked about it, but I think we have. For businesses, in order to get a grant, you have to show hardship.
Yes.
That's not something that someone just dreamed up. That's in the federal rules, the federal final rule, the federal regulation, hardship. At one point in time, Janice Small, who was handling matters for the law department, in a preliminary draft of the application, the explanation for that said that it is vital to demonstrate hardship. That was stricken out, I think, under political pressure. But the council in the end went back to hardship or adversity. They're synonymous. So hardship is a requirement locally and federally. And so who was supposed to determine that? Not the consultant. So those that say, well, the consultant passed it on to the committee, therefore it must comply with ARPA. No. The consultant's job was not to measure hardship. They weren't doing that. What they measured was, or they assessed, was completeness of the application and the use of the money. If the money was going to be used for an ARPA consistent purpose, it complied with ARPA. So it complied with that part of ARPA, but only that part of ARPA. The consultant didn't address, you know, hardship, or well, let me just stop there. It didn't address that. So here's an application. Remember, hardship. It's a restaurant, probably most of us know. Before the pandemic in 2018, it made $424,000, rounded number, $424,000 net profit. The year before the pandemic, it went down a little bit to $394,000 before the pandemic. During the pandemic, it went up. Net profit went up. $432,000, I'm rounding. And in 2021, the year after the pandemic, $715,224. They put in a hardship application. You say, well, how could the consultant allow that? That's not even $715,000 net profit. That can't be a hardship. Yet the consultant released it to the committee. Luckily, not luckily, but we were aware of that hardship requirement, of course, and we didn't pass it. I bring up this to illustrate the role of the consultant, what it does and doesn't do. And it does not screen these applications for that requirement of hardship. So there's another principle of ARPA, federal, which involves the Grange. The Grange, after some, in Sam Carmody's words, some fuss, which unduly minimizes the problems with the Grange application, but that's how he characterized it. The Grange application illustrates another requirement of federal ARPA. And that's the principle of proportionality. Federal law, the federal rule, the federal regulation says that municipalities can help businesses, small businesses, by responding to the financial hardship the business underwent. And what does respond to means? And the federal rule said a response has to be proportional. If you lost 10,000, you make up 10,000. If you lost 10,000 but only get 500 from your municipality, that's not really a response, is it? It's not proportional. If you lost 10,000 and the municipality gives you 182,000, that's a windfall. That's not proportional either. Which brings us to the Grange. So in the case of the Grange, the duty of the committee was to try to identify, because this is what the role is, try to identify and measure how the pandemic financially impacted the Grange. And then if other qualifications are met, respond proportionately. Well, the Grange is the only nonprofit that got money that didn't provide a shred of financial information, not a shred. All the other nonprofits that got money or that applied provided the appropriate financial information. In some cases, they had to be prompted by the consultant. But my point is, if the nonprofit got the money, they provided financial information, but not the Grange. I don't know why. Was it preferential treatment? I am not sure. So the committee had a very hard time in trying to measure what the Grange lost as a result of the pandemic, but it was common knowledge that they were in the brink of collapse. In fact, they turned in their charter in 2022. So the most that could be said is maybe they missed a fundraiser because of the pandemic. Maybe they missed two. At the best case scenario, maybe they missed two. A chicken dinner, I don't know how much you make out of a chicken dinner, but probably the reason why they weren't raising money is because their membership had collapsed, their leadership had collapsed, and they're on the brink of going out of business, anyway. But let's say they missed out on fundraising $10,000. Under no circumstances, under federal law, can they get $182,000. It's not proportionate. That's federal ARPA, the rule of proportionality. So people are going around, members of I don't know who, but certainly on the council, they say, well, it complies with ARPA. No, it does not. It fails the rule of proportionality. No windfalls. No windfalls for the benefit of the federal government and for the benefit of the town of Wallingford. You can't make the pandemic the best thing that ever happened to a nonprofit or a business. It's not a blank check. You suffer $10 of loss, let's get 10,000 of ARPA funds. It's not how it's supposed to work, to be fair to everybody. Well, that's how the Grange application went through. It was not proportionate. They didn't provide required financial information. Their programming, not only did they fail to identify a financial need, but whatever need it wasn't $182,000. It might have been a chicken dinner or two. And their programming was not COVID connected. It was to replace a roof and refurbish the building. You really got to stretch it to say that money goes to help Wallingford residents recover from the impacts, health or financial, of the pandemic. Didn't fit. We love the Grange. We love what they do. Wonderful organization nationally, maybe internationally, I'm not even sure, but wonderful organization. Again, great people in the past, great people now. It's a round hole and square peg problem. It's not a good fit. Finally, and then I'm going to take a drink of water and let you talk. That organization, the local Grange, is ineligible under federal law. They just are not eligible the way they're organized under the Internal Revenue Code. They're a fraternal organization. Their Internal Revenue Code has qualified them as a 501c8. Fraternal organization, 501c8. A 501c8 is not supposed to get money. They can't get money. They're prohibited from getting money. The consultant has told them. But they got the money anyway through a backdoor scheme, sort of a straw man sponsorship arrangement where the money goes to a 501c3, another organization, and that organization spends it on behalf of the local Grange. It's an end run around the spirit, and I would argue the letter of federal ARPA. How could this happen? Well, that's sort of the fuss that one of the counselors talked about. The consultant said, no, let it go. This was brought up at the council meeting, and Janice Small, the town corporation counsel, said, I talked to the consultant said, yeah, it happens all the time. I don't think so. I don't think there's ever been a case where ARPA money, where ARPA says no to 501c8s, where money was allowed to go to a 501c8 through a 501c3. But in any event, the consultant had no authority for his opinion, didn't cite text from the final rule, didn't cite text from the Treasury, didn't cite text from this regulation, text from the statute, didn't cite a case in court, didn't cite any authority, but said, nah, let it go. Corporation counsel said, put it in writing. I'm not going to be responsible for this. She didn't say it that way, but she said, put it in writing. That was at the council meeting. So the consultant did. I think the local 501c8 can get the money, can get the benefit of the money through this end run process. That bothered members of the committee, should have bothered members of the council, should bother members of the public. This is how local government works, and part of the mission of the Citizens of Mike Show. How and why does local government work? It's what we do. Said that from 2010 on forward, part of the mission of the show. So I'm in the process of getting a report card out. How does local government work? Is it working well? This is the story of the Grange. I jotted down some notes about how some counselors justified this, Christina, but before I get to my notes, I've taken enough of your time. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I believe I also voted no on this one. For many of the reasons you stated. Another interesting piece of this one was, I believe when the committee scored this one, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the committee did not pass it, but it did pass based on the rule changes that the council made. So when there was kind of a mathematical equation used to pass more entities that did not pass the committee, and I believe this was one of those. And so I was just based on that, I wasn't supportive, because I wanted the committee scoring to be what we adhered to. And but yeah, I mean, it was the room was fairly full that night, the council chambers, and like you said, it's tough to, you have these good people there that are doing this good thing, and it's tough to sit there and tell them no. But if you're, I think like you said, if you're going by the strict ARPA rules, it was a no. And it's hard as a counselor to sit there and say that, but that's what I did. And
yeah, it's tough. It's tough, but you're right. The committee did not pass the Grange application for a variety of reasons. I think all of which I mentioned. Is diverse opinions on the committee, as there should be. There are 10 people. I think there were 9 voting that night, maybe 8. But no, it didn't pass. But the council or the law department or the consultant made sure it passed. Anyway, which more than questionable. But anyway, why did the councilors vote for the Grange? I have some notes. Tom Laffin, he never addressed the criteria which he voted on and approved. He said it was a nice group. It's going to be a nice building. It's not the criteria he voted for. Councilor Allenson, who was the author of the standard deviation mathematical formula, which allowed the town council to approve the Grange application without even reading it. She said she appreciated the passion behind the group, and She wanted to make sure the building was safe, all admirable reasons, but the wrong reasons. They have nothing to do with the criteria. Again, we all admire the passion of the new Grange group. Passion does not make a successful application unless you're a counselor or two. Sam Carmody featured the sense of community as a reason for his approval.
Well, one more thing too, with the Grange and with Gaylord, so tie it all together. Another thing that happened too was that they were allowed to speak. Gaylord was at the table presenting their case at 2 meetings, and no one else was afforded that. So the committee initially said that when your application was being heard, you could not speak, and that was to kind of keep everything even. So whatever was in your application, that was what you were judged on. So just another facet of these two where they were able to kind of maybe address the concerns or plead their case more than some others who may not have been approved. And maybe if they had the opportunity to discuss their applications, maybe would have been approved. I certainly don't blame Gaylord or the Grange. I mean, they submitted their applications, and good for them. But it's just there was rule changes along the way. There was you were allowed to present and you weren't, and it's just sloppy. And I think it's not fair to those who weren't afforded those opportunities. And
Yeah.
that's where it ended up.
Hey, look, let's talk about the budget. Christina, so you did a lot of work on the budget this past winter. I think you saw not 100% victory or rewards for your efforts, but you accomplished a lot, even though you didn't get everything that you had in mind. Usually there's a bit of a push and pull between the executive branch and and the council about mill rates and budgets and things. So with that setting of the table, I want you to pick up where I left off. What happened? What was your role? How did things end up?
Sure. So like I've done every year since I've been here, I made a proposal or a set of proposals that edited the mayor's budget that would have resulted in a zero tax increase. This package, if it had passed as is, it also would have restored $200,000, I believe, in Board of Education spending that the mayor did not have in his budget. It also had some additional funding for public safety items and a few things that addressed COVID-19 kind of lingering effects. But the bottom line was the no tax increase. So, and every year when I've done these, basically what my method is I don't do anything really, out in left field. I do whatever the mayor did in his budget, but I kind of just try to shuffle some numbers and change things around to get to that zero tax or even a tax decrease. And 1 year we achieved that.
In addition, and this is important, there was a commitment made to use ARPA money for townwide projects, trucks, equipment. I mean, I'm not going to go through the list of stuff, but it was a lot of stuff for the common good that came out of this budget. Am I getting it kind of right? I mean, that's the first time that's happened.
Yes and no. So the mayor did have in his budget about 2.8 million, a little more than 2.8 million of ARPA funds to fund capital items that we normally would have used taxpayer money to pay for. Fire engines, there was a bunch of capital items like that. In my proposal, I raised that by an additional 1.1. So using ARPA money instead of using tax money. That was a little bit of a risky move because when you pull something out of the budget, you need that commitment from the council and the administration that they're actually going to use the ARPA money on it. But that all ultimately ended up going through. So we saved some money there.
So there are a couple of other things that happened. One, you raised the mayor's salary a lot. What'd you think of that?
I I believe I abstained from that vote. At that point, I wasn't really sure politically where I was where I was heading, and so I did abstain from that one.
It was kind of not funny, but it's, you know, watching from the sidelines, it was kind of amusing because I think it was it Sam Carmody that made the motion to increase the mayor's salary dramatically. And so I'm watching, you know, I wonder how this is going to go. I mean, by a lot of money, you know, by like $30,000 to $40,000, the mayor's salary was raised as election year. So the two guys on the council that are going to get the benefit of this, if one of them are, you know, elected. So I see, you know, Vinny Testa acting as if, in my opinion, being very theatrical, as if he didn't know this motion was coming. And he agonizes him, oh, how do I vote on this? You know, what do I do? I'm a candidate for mayor. I'm going to get this raise. You know, well, I'm in favor of a raise for the mayor. By the time it came down to Vinny Cervoni, who always votes last, you know, he was in favor of it. The other thing before we run out of time is that you're taking more money from the fund balance, right? You are taking $1.5 million out. Is that true? More than before?
On paper, but as we've discussed multiple times on here, that won't get spent.
So let's put up on the screen the history of our fund balances. And I guess the relevance of this chart that is up there now is that the more you draw, in my opinion, the more you draw on the fund balance to balance the budget, the more exposed you are to running an operating deficit that may not be good or bad, but you can't keep running deficits all the time. I mean, after a while, it catches up with you. But there is a myth out there that the town racks up surpluses every year, and they just don't. They just don't. So we don't know what's going to happen in 2023. That's the year ended a few days ago, June 30, 2023. But this is the history of surpluses and deficits. We run, in the past few years, we run a lot of deficits. And changing the image on the screen to my little pie chart there, this is useful because it tells us how much we have in the fund, in our general fund balance, and what the money is there for. And as of June 30, 2022, which is the last official word that we have, the most recent official information, almost $28 million in the general fund, but some of that is spoken for, and $17,534,000 is available for appropriation. The caution flag is that if you use too much of that, the bond rating agencies may punish you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, you know, in regards to the budget, my goal has always been just, I don't want to tax people for things that we don't need to tax them for. And, you know, there was a way with this budget to not raise taxes. Unfortunately, it didn't go that way this year. But, you know, we keep trying, and hopefully if I'm back there again next year, I'll try again. And
yeah, good. And what'll be interesting, it'll be you versus Vinny Cervoni if he wins, you versus Vinny Testa if he wins, and you versus Riley O'Connell if he wins, if they propose a tax increase. If any one of the three propose a tax increase.
Maybe it won't be a versus.
That is going to be worth buying popcorn for. Okay. Hey, thanks for coming on the Citizen Mike Show. Hope to see you back soon. Good luck on the campaign trail, and thanks everyone for watching. We do appreciate it, and check out WPAA TV because it thankfully broadcasts the Citizen Mike Show too. Good night, everybody. Good night, Christina.